Kansas, 1872, the wind tore across the dry fields like a warning. Tessa Granger crouched low in the tall corn, her breathing shallow, her arms steady as she held little Lyle close to her chest. His brothers and sisters huddled silently beside her, dust-streaked and wide-eyed. The sun was sinking fast, and behind them, the smoke from their wagon still curled into the sky. "Do not move," she whispered, brushing Loretta's tangled hair behind her ear. "No matter what you hear." The children nodded, eyes full of trust and fear. Tessa pressed a hand to her belly to settle her nerves. She had kept them alive for this long. She would keep doing it. She peeked through the stalks. The men who had attacked them were long gone now, their horses a distant blur on the horizon. She had run with the children the moment the first shot rang out. Their father, her brother, had not been fast enough, neither had his wife. And now the 5 children, none older than 10, were hers to protect. Tessa had nothing but the clothes on her back, a knife tucked in her boot, and a promise she had made to her brother as he lay dying. Keep them safe. She stayed there until darkness swallowed the land. The children trembled but made no sound. When the moon rose, she gathered them close and led them deeper into the cornfield, down to the dry creek bed, where the soil was soft and the stars felt like a roof. That night she did not sleep. By morning, the little ones were hungry. She tore strips of cloth from her underskirt, made a sling for baby Lyle, and carried him on her hip. Then she started walking, the other 4 trailing behind her like ducklings. They followed the railroad tracks for hours. Her feet bled. Her throat cracked. But she walked until her legs gave out, and even then she crawled. Somewhere out here there had to be help. They were near a stretch of open prairie when she heard the horse. She spun around, pulling the children behind her. Her knife was in her hand so fast she barely realized it. The rider slowed, taking in the sight a woman caked in dust, her arms braced in protection over 5 ragged children. He dismounted, slow and careful, hands visible. "I am not here to hurt you," he said, voice low and calm. "Name's Silas McKee. I saw the smoke last night." "Been tracking the trail." Tessa stared at him, her hand still tight around the knife. He was tall, maybe 30, lean and worn from the sun, with a quiet steadiness in his eyes that made her hesitate. "I do not need a man's help," she said, chin lifted. Silas looked past her at the children. "Looks like they might." Loretta stepped forward, tugging Tessa's sleeve. "I am so hungry, Aunt Tess." Tessa's jaw clenched. She looked back at Silas. "You got food?" he nodded, reaching into his saddlebag and tossing her a cloth-wrapped bundle. She caught it without lowering the knife. Inside was jerky, bread, and dried apples. She gave it to the kids without a word. They devoured it like wolves. Silas waited, standing a few paces back, reins in hand. He did not ask questions. He did not offer pity. He simply waited. "I hid them in a cornfield," she said finally. "While the men who killed their parents burned our wagon." His expression tightened. "Where were you headed? Anywhere safer than Missouri?" He nodded. "I have a place, north a ways, not much, but land, a roof, food. You and the children can come." Tessa studied him. "Why would you do that?" "Because someone needs to," he said. "And I do not like seeing kids starve." She hesitated. Her whole life had been running from men who made promises and broke them, but Silas McKee did not look like a man who lied. The ride to his homestead took a day and a half. He let the children ride his horse and walked beside them, guiding them across ravines and dry fields. At night, he made a fire and handed Tessa his bedroll while he leaned against a tree. He did not try to talk much, just watched over them like a quiet wall. When they finally reached the homestead, it was small, 1 room, a barn, a chicken coop, and a well. But it was clean and it was safe. That night, the children slept in a row on the floor, bellies full for the first time in days. Tessa stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching Silas chop wood. "You do not even know us," she said. He paused, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "I know enough. You walked miles on torn feet to save 5 kids. That tells me everything." She looked away, her throat tight. "I do not want your charity. I am not offering it. I am offering a home." She turned to him sharply. "You do not know what you are saying. They are not easy. They are scared. They cry at night, and I am not soft. I do not know how to be a mother." Silas stepped closer, his gaze steady. "You are already being one." Her breath shook. She did not back away. "You do not have to stay," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but I want to." Tessa blinked fast, looking toward the barn. "We will sleep out there. I will not trouble your house." "You are not trouble," he said, voice low. "And that is not just my house anymore." She looked up at him then, really looked. There was no judgment in his face, no pity, just a quiet strength like stone under the dirt, and before she could stop herself, she whispered, "Thank you." He nodded. "You are welcome, Tessa." In the weeks that followed, the homestead changed. Silas built bunk beds in the corner for the children, taught them how to tend the chickens, how to fish in the creek. He showed Loretta how to plant potatoes and helped Lyle walk his first steps in the grass. Tessa watched it all with cautious eyes. But each day her guard dropped a little more. One afternoon, she found him fixing the porch rail, sleeves rolled up, sawdust clinging to his arms. She leaned against the post, arms crossed. "You ever been married?" she asked. "No, why not?" He looked at her, a soft smile touching his mouth. "Never met a woman like you before." Tessa's heart beat faster. She looked down, pretending to brush dirt off her skirt. "I am not the sweet kind." "Good," he said. "Sweet can break, you do not." She looked up at him. "You really want all this? Me, them, the mess of it?" Silas stepped closer. "I have never wanted anything more." And then, before she could stop herself, she reached for his hand. He took it, warm and calloused, no hesitation. For the first time in her life, Tessa did not feel like she was running. She felt like she was standing still and maybe, just maybe, beginning something real. She glanced back at the house, where the children's laughter echoed through the open window. "I think," she said softly, "we might be home." The wheat sprouted late that year, gold heads slow to rise through the spring soil, but sturdy once they did. Silas hammered in a new fence post on the south edge of the pasture, the sun warming the back of his neck. Behind him, the low murmur of children's voices floated from the garden patch, where Tessa was showing the older ones how to thin carrots without killing the roots. He paused, brushed dust from his palms, and turned just enough to see her. She had tied her hair back with a strip of muslin, sleeves rolled to the elbow, hands sunk deep in the dirt. Her voice was quiet, her movements careful. The children listened without question. Even Jacob, who still flinched at sudden sounds and sometimes woke crying, leaned in close to hear her. Silas turned back to the post and drove it deeper. Later, after supper split peas and corn cakes, Silas stepped outside to check the horses. He found Tessa already at the gate, a shawl around her shoulders, her eyes on the tree line beyond the pasture. He joined her in silence. "The boy saw something," she said, not looking at him. "A shape near the creek. Could have been nothing." "Could have been something," Silas said. She nodded once, jaw tight. "I'll ride the edge of the property at first light," he said. "See if there's any tracks." "I'll go too." "You won't," he said gently. "If anything's out there, I don't want you near it." Her arms folded. "I've handled worse." He didn't argue, just said, "You'll stay with them. That's how we keep them safe." She fell quiet, but she didn't leave. The moon was nearly full, the light silver on the grass. Between them, the silence stretched long and calm. "I used to think quiet meant something bad was coming," she said after a while. "Now I think maybe it's just peace, and I never knew what peace sounded like before." Silas looked over at her, the way her shoulders had dropped slightly, the way her eyes stayed fixed on the woods but with less weight than before. "I'm glad you hear it now," he said. She turned to him. "You ever lose someone, Silas?" He hesitated. Then, "My older brother, fever when I was 17, my ma not long after. My pa was already gone by then. I'm sorry. I had to figure it out on my own for a while, what mattered. Who I wanted to be. And I wanted to be someone who made things steadier, not worse." She looked at him then, really looked. "You are." The words settled between them, warm and certain. He reached over, slow and sure, and touched the edge of her hand where it rested on the fence rail. She didn't pull away. "I never planned on staying anywhere long," she said. "You're not passing through anymore." She nodded, eyes shining faintly in the dark. Back inside, Loretta was humming low while she wrapped a scrap doll in a square of flannel. Jacob had fallen asleep in the corner with a book open on his chest. The twins were curled like kittens across the foot of the bedroll, and Lyle dozed in the cradle Silas had carved from an old apple crate. Tessa pulled the door closed behind them. Silas took down his rifle, checked the chamber, and set it by the window. "Just in case," he said. She touched his arm before she lay down. "Thank you for watching over us." He reached for her hand again, held it a moment longer this time. You watch over us too." Neither of them said anything more that night, but the wind outside was still, the fire burned low. And for the first time since the cornfield, Tessa slept without fear pressing against her ribs. The rains came late that spring, heavy enough to soak through the roof's weak spot above the stove. Tessa stood on a stool, pressing a folded flour sack against the drip while Silas hammered a patch of tin into place from the outside. The children had taken shelter in the barn, where Loretta kept them busy sorting acorns and twine into separate pails. Lyle, too young to sort, gnawed solemnly on a braided leather strap Silas had given him to teeth. By nightfall, the roof held. Tessa ladled stew into bowls while Silas dried his sleeves by the fire. Jacob sat near the hearth, watching the flames dance, but his shoulders were looser now, his eyes less tight with worry. The twins had begun to hum again, soft and out of tune but fearless. After the children were laid down, Tessa stepped outside and leaned against the porch rail, wet wood cool beneath her hands. Silas joined her, his boots quiet on the planks. She didn't glance his way. "I used to think a roof was just something to keep the rain off. Now I think it might be the most sacred thing in the world." He rested his arms beside hers, close but not touching. "It can be if you build it right." The wind carried the smell of damp earth and ash. A night bird called somewhere near the pasture. "I've been thinking," Tessa said. "They'll need school come fall. Loretta's already asking questions I don't have answers for. There's a woman teaches out of her parlor down in Maple Hollow. She's got slates and books, might take them if we ask right." Tessa turned toward him. "You'd take them that far?" "I would." She studied his face. "You don't even blink when I ask." "I don't need to," he said. "Anything they need, you just say." She looked down at the porch boards. "I was never supposed to raise anyone. I was meant to sew seams, keep house." The idea of teaching a child scared me half to death. "You're doing it anyway." She gave a short breath, something close to a laugh. "Reckon that's the whole of it." Silas hesitated. "You ever think about what comes after?" She frowned. "After what?" "After the fear's gone, the grief. After they stop waking in the night and the fences are all mended and the land's yours as much as mine." She didn't answer right away. The sky had cleared and the stars stretched wide above them, quiet and sure. "I think about what kind of woman I'd be then," she said. "If I'd finally stop looking over my shoulder." "And what do you see?" "I see a woman with dirt under her nails and lines on her face who doesn't need to run anymore." His voice was low. "I see her too." Their hands brushed, and she let his fingers wrap around hers. "I don't know how to be soft," she said. "I don't need soft," he said. "I need solid. I need someone who'd walk through a field of gunfire with 5 children behind her and not give in." She looked down at their joined hands. "Then you've got her." His thumb moved once across her knuckles, slow and reverent. Inside the house, Lyle stirred in his cradle but didn't wake. Tessa leaned against Silas, shoulder to shoulder, and let the warmth of him steady her. No need for declarations. No rush. Just the quiet truth of 2 people who had already chosen, even if they hadn't said it aloud. The porch creaked under their weight, and the wind shifted just enough to carry the scent of blooming sage from the hill beyond the barn. Tessa tilted her head to rest against him. "We'll need more seed come summer. I'll ride to town at week's end, make a list. I'll knit you another pair of socks. You already did. I'll do better this time. Last pair was uneven." He smiled, and this time she let herself smile too. The night deepened, and neither of them moved. There was no need. Everything they needed was already right there. The cottonwood trees along the creek leafed out in full by mid-May, their rustle a soft hush against the morning air. Tessa stood by the wash barrel behind the house, wringing out a boy's shirt, her fingers red from the cold water. Jacob was stacking kindling nearby, slower than the others but careful, like he wanted to get it right. She didn't correct him. He was quiet today, but not the brittle kind of quiet, just thoughtful. When the pile was done, he looked up. "Can I go with Silas today?" Tessa wrung the shirt once more and shook it out. "Where to?" He said he's checking the upper pasture for signs of fox. She blinked, surprised. "He asked you?" Jacob scraped mud from his boot heel with a stick. "No, ma'am, I asked him." She studied his face. "You think you're ready for that kind of work?" He nodded, not proud, just certain. She hung the shirt on the line and wiped her hands. "Then go on. Stay close. Listen sharp." He took off without another word, and she watched him jog toward the barn, his shoulders a little higher than when he'd woken. By the time the sun reached its peak, Silas had returned with Jacob riding double behind him. They'd brought back 2 snapped traps and a sack of wild onions. Jacob's hands were filthy, his cheeks flushed, and he was grinning in a way she hadn't seen since before they lost their wagon. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Tessa sat on the step outside the door, combing burrs from the hem of her skirt. Silas joined her, lowering himself beside her with a soft grunt. "He did good," Silas said, stretching his legs. "I saw," she answered. "He doesn't grin easy." "There's something steady in him," she nodded, quiet a moment. "Feels like they're starting to land, not just survive." Silas leaned back against the wall. "That's your doing. I think it's both of us." A dog barked far off, something from the neighboring ridge. The wind carried the sound and then let it go. Silas turned his head slightly, his voice lower. "There's a man in Ellison Fork, knows land law. If we want to sign it over in both names, he can draw the papers." Tessa's hands stilled. "You mean the deed?" "I do." She looked out over the field where the moon lit the rows of sprouting wheat. "I never thought my name would be on anything but a grave marker." Silas didn't answer right away. When he did, it was slow and certain. "I want you tied to this place, Tessa. Not because you have to be, because it's yours." She turned toward him. "And what else?" He met her eyes. "And because you're mine, if you'll have it that way." Her voice was quiet. "I never wore a ring. I never bought one." She smiled then, small and tired and true. "Suppose we try it anyway." He reached for her hand, not gentle but firm, like it was already part of his. She let him. The next morning, while the children picked chokecherries along the fence line, Tessa stood in the small mirror Silas had nailed to the cabin wall. She brushed her hair smoother than usual and pinned it up tight. Her hands didn't shake. Outside, Silas hitched the wagon for the trip to Ellison Fork. Loretta peeked in through the open door. "Are we going somewhere, Aunt Tess?" Tessa turned, smoothing the front of her skirt. "We are." "Just a short ride." The girl's eyes lit with curiosity. "What for?" Tessa stepped past her and into the morning light. "To put something down in ink, something that'll stay." Silas waited, reins in hand. As she climbed up beside him, he glanced her way but didn't speak. He didn't have to. The children waved from the yard as the wagon rolled forward, and the road unfolded easy before them, the ruts worn smooth from use, the dust not quite settled from yesterday's wind. Tessa glanced at Silas, then out at the land. It was all still rough, still new, but it was theirs now. And it would hold. The church in Maple Hollow stood on a low rise above the river bend, whitewashed and plain, with clapboard siding that caught the light like bone. It was a Thursday when Tessa and Silas stood before the preacher, the children dressed in their best, their only Sunday clothes. No crowd, no cake, just the truth of it. The preacher's wife held Lyle. Loretta gripped Tessa's hand throughout, thumb pressed against her palm like she needed to feel the vow happen through skin and bone. Afterward, they walked back to the wagon while the sun glowed low behind them, and Silas helped Tessa up first. His hand lingered on hers longer than the climb required. "Feels different," she said as they started down the road, "but not in the way I thought it might." "How's that?" "Like the ground's firmer under my feet." Silas nodded, reins slack in his hands. "It is." They planted corn the next week, borrowed seed from the widow Clemens 3 parcels over. Tessa traded 2 jars of apple preserves for it, her lips pressed thin in quiet pride as she handed them over. She had made the preserves herself, after all cut and sugared, boiled and sealed. Her first batch that hadn't scorched. By midsummer, the children had taken to fishing most mornings. Silas let them run the line along the southern edge of the creek, where the deeper pools stayed shaded. Jacob kept the tally on a flat stone, scratching marks with a charred stick. Tessa stitched new hems while they were out, her mending basket finally less full than the week before. One evening, as the wheat turned amber and the hens settled early in the coop, Tessa sat on the porch's edge with a tin of preserved cherries between them. She handed Silas the spoon. "You ever think we'd end up here?" "No," he said. "But I hoped." She took the spoon next, straight from where he'd left it. "I didn't even know what to hope for back then." "You do now." She tipped her head toward the barn, where the children's lantern flickered faint behind the slats. "Now I do." He didn't reach for her hand this time. He kissed it, Later that week, Silas spent a day fitting hinges to the new smokehouse door while Tessa strung beans for drying. The smell of river mint drifted up from the bank, and when the wind shifted, she heard the twins arguing over the difference between a muskrat and a weasel. She didn't interrupt. Let them figure it. That night, after the children were asleep, Tessa stepped outside and found Silas by the fence, lantern hanging from the post, rifle across his knees. She brought a quilt, laid it down in the grass beside him, and sat without speaking. "You think we've done right by them?" he asked. She leaned back beside him, fingers laced over her belly. "I think they laugh more than they cry now." "That's enough," she turned her head to face him. "It's everything." In the dark, he kissed her shoulder. She let herself lean into him, the weight of years gone finally slipping off her spine. They didn't speak again until the stars had moved farther west and the lantern burned low. When they rose, he reached for her hand and she took it, easy as breath. The seasons turned. The corn came up clean, the wheat held strong. By the first frost, the smokehouse was full, and the children had grown into the chores like they'd been raised to them. Jacob carved his first spoon. Loretta read every book Silas could borrow from town. The twins, still wild, learned to patch their own trousers. Lyle took his first steps unassisted across the packed earth between the barn and the porch, straight into Silas's waiting arms. Tessa built a cupboard with her own hands. Sturdy pine, planed smooth with a blade Silas had honed for her the night before. She filled it with jars she'd sealed herself, every one lined in rows like a promise kept. On the first snow, she and Silas stood in the doorway and watched the flakes fall soft across the land they'd claimed together. He wrapped his arm around her waist and she leaned her head against his chest. "We made it," she said. "We did." And they had. Years passed and the house expanded, 2 rooms added, a lean-to for the wash basin, a root cellar deeper than the last. The children grew tall and sure. They found lives of their own but always returned for harvest, for winter holidays, for the quiet safety this place had come to mean. Tessa and Silas never left the homestead. They woke each morning to the sound of wind through wheat and the low creak of the porch rail. They worked side by side. They aged slow and steady. One spring, Silas planted a row of apple saplings along the north fence. When the first one bloomed, white and bright against the still brown field, Tessa stood beside him, fingers curled around his. "It's early," she said. He smiled. "So were we." Still took root. They stayed that way a long time, just watching the blossoms hold, and in the years that followed, they never let go.